Alright, so today we're going to be looking at a few unique shots with these three Discmania PDs, the Nordic Phenom, the Lone Howl 3, and the C-Line PD, Metal Flake, and S-Line. We're going to put them on some unique lines, more ones that are maybe suited for this disc in a very particular weather. It's pretty windy out here. We're going to be throwing downhill into a headwind, a few really tight turnover shots, and some forehands. And we're going to compare them here and there to an Instinct and the new FD3, so we can see where these fit in comparison to those. So let's check it out. And don't forget, if you need some discs, you can go to thearmorydiscgolf.com and use code ARMORY10TAYLOR to get another 10% off of your purchase. Supporting them helps support me and helps me continue to make videos like this. So thank you guys, and let's get back to it. So I had to come inside because it was too windy to actually be able to finish talking about them outside. But regarding how they feel and look, I know everyone's seen this Italian C-Line plastic. It feels a bit tighter, more firm, but I actually think for the usage of this disc, this is a good feeling in the hand and gives you more of the confidence you're looking for what we're going to be talking about. The Metal Flake, notoriously, just like with the Mindbender, the Lone Howl 3 definitely feels a bit grippier, has some more give to it. Stamp obviously looks good, and I just like their C-Line Metal Flake plastic. And so then we get into the S-Line, but it does feel really nice. It's grippy. It's a bit firmer than the Metal Flake, but feels good in the hand, just as like confident feeling. And of course, they're really good at their designs and their stamps. But then we went into what we're throwing. So we're going downhill about 320 to 340. The S-Line handles the wind really, really well, puts a little bit of turn into it, but that's really about it. And it has its same straight and hard finish. Get into the Metal Flake, same idea. It looks to be a tad more stable than the S-Line, but continues to go forward, no problem into this wind or going downhill with gravity, and then finishes hard left. And then the C-Line start off extremely stable. Now, I don't think this is a bad thing. After throwing them, I have some final thoughts, but you'll see that this one being relatively new, only thrown about a dozen times or less, isn't affected by the wind at all, and then fights even harder left for more of a crazy skip. And then just for some better comparison for different slots in the bag, I threw the Instinct, and so this is a brand new Instinct, and so I threw it out flat, and the wind just kept it on a really flat turn out, and then just soft finish. And then I wanted to compare it to the FD3, because for some people the FD3 has too much of a flare skip, and it actually doesn't push out far enough on backhand or forehand compared to these, which is what I think the unique place in the bag for this is. And so you see it flies out effortless into the wind, but then has a way harder skip unless you're going to hyzer spike it. And then we move in to about the 380, 400-foot shot. And on that one, you see that the FD3 has no problem making it all the way down to about 380, but it does have a harder flare skip on some of the shots it's thrown on. And so on more narrow windows, like the first one where I'm trying to stay between the flag and the pole, you don't want to skip off. So that's where the PD comes in. And you'll see the Lone Howl 3, the Metal Flake, it just flies straight, a little bit of turn, but it has more than enough stability to fight out of it and then back out in. And then same thing with the PD, letting it loose and trying to keep it in this narrow window. Even on anhyzer, downhill into a wind, the C-Line just fights over in with its anhyzer and then fights out of it at the end before it would essentially pass out of bounds, was my imaginary line. And the S-Line, same idea. It still has a bit less stability than the other two, but it has its turn relatively straight. But I have noticed that into a headwind and going downhill, if it's put on too much of an anhyzer, it'll just kind of fight to the right. And then I wanted to do a really tight window, like tight, need to go around a corner and still hit a gap type of turnover shot. I'll start off with the Instinct so you can see how that would be into a headwind. So I left it out wide like I naturally would with a disc like that, and it holds its wide turn, comes out like it's supposed to, but you need it to be wider with a more straight fairway like that, stable fairway. And then with the FD, I needed to push it more and keep it tight, but even with that, it fought out before it entered the gap I needed it to enter. But then enter the PD, And this S line, I push it out and it just pushes forward, flattens out, and then just finishes flat on that line, which is really, really nice when you think about you're kind of in a rough spot or you have a really windy wooded shot. And so same thing, Lone How, it was going on the same exact line and then it just kind of hit that bench. But man, it just felt, you feel really confident throwing these on a tight, low line, knowing they're gonna fight out, but they're not gonna fight out as aggressive as the FD3, except for more of a brand new C-line PD. That one you'll see it, I even put it more of a steep angle, and it pushes out, swings hard right, and then even still actually starts to swing back hard left. Then we get into two of our two forehand shots, and I'm trying to land it somewhere near that bench there in the bottom of the screen. And so I start with the instinct. That one, I threw it with a little bit of hyzer, but it flipped up straight and just kind of carried left and never came out of it. And then we get into the FD3 and I throw it. That one, you always feel confident throwing it flat and then knowing it's gonna fight right, and it did. It just flares, and you'll see that in the screen too. But then we get into things like the PD. You'll see that with the S line, the Lone How, and the PD, I'm able to throw them all flat the whole way. You may not see that from that angle, but I threw it flat into the gap and needing it to skip and fight to the right. They all did that, and so you'll see that here in just a second. And then I did one more forehand shot, and you'll see on the right side of the screen there's a bunch of cars which I played as my OB line, and I could not hit those. And so I needed something that was going to push into the gap from where I was, and you can see this gap, I'll have it highlighted, and it was going to need to push through that gap and then swing out. And so I started with the instinct, and that one, based on the last shot, I threw it with even more hyzer so that it would come in and around, and it's the only reason it looks like from that angle it has a lot of stabilities. Same thing with the FD3, I threw that pretty flat directly at the cars, and it still fights forward, and then immediately after the tree it just fades out. And then we got into the Nordic Phenom, the S line, and this one freaked me out because I did forehand it directly at the cars, but it did catch edge right there at the end after pushing for quite a while. And then same thing with the Lone How, I kind of recorrected it a little. I put this one up a bit higher and pushed it there so I wouldn't be in such risk of hitting those cars, but it pushed further than the FD3 did and still had that really reliable fade at the end. And then same thing with the PD. This one is even more stable, so I was able to push it forward for quite a while, and then it fought out a little sooner than the other two. And so those were quite a few of the unique lines that I was able to put them on. So my overall thoughts when I throw these discs, and you guys either having thrown them know this or maybe seeing it now, the S line is the most understable of them, followed by the Metal Flake, followed by the PD. Now I will say, and I'm going to make a video about this, is that when this C-line plastic is beat in, which I have one in the bag of this, it flies more like this Metal Flake PD, and actually slightly more understable. But for me, these unique lines are primarily what I have the PD in the bag for. But for those of you with a little less arm speed, I do think the Nordic Phenom would be a really good spot for you in the bag, or the Lone How. Like, I really like them all. For me, I think if I could, I'd love to have two of them in the bag, a really stable one for situations like today where it's downhill and windy, and then some of these for more of my pushing forehand shots. I think that's a really phenomenal disc. When they first came out, didn't think they had a place for it in the bag, but they were phenomenal. And thank you guys again for watching. Let me know your thoughts and your experiences with the PD.